Shawns Museum, a popular place where people can come and glance over the wax figurines displayed within. We had a whole host of pieces, all made after specific historical persons. We even had a few displays depicting famous battles. I proudly worked there for several years, and I had taken care of each and every piece that had come through. I cleaned and maintained each figurine, allowing them to be presented to our patrons in full. Recently, we had a new piece come through. The details were sketchy, but we did find out the piece came from an unnamed artist from South America. It was of an occult priest from a faith I or my colleagues were not familiar with. It was, however, beautifully crafted. Quite honestly, the best wax figurine I had ever seen. The figure itself was dressed in traditional garb with his arms stretched out towards the sky. After some examination, I concluded it was likely of Aztec or Mayan origin. After which, we added some finishing touches and later placed him within the appropriate exhibit. The rest of the night was spent poring over what materials we had to better explain him. I spent that night at the museum alone. It was 12:30, and I just walked out of my office for another cup of coffee. I brought with me the book I was reading. It regarded the ritual traditions of the Aztecs. I had initially skimmed it. Afterwards, I read through it carefully, but to my dismay, I found nothing in relation to our new piece. Even in the other related literatures, there was nothing regarding him. While I poured my newest cup of coffee, I heard a noise from down the hall towards the American Civil War exhibit. Assuming it was a rodent, and occasionally we had those, or it was me being sleep deprived, I decided to investigate the disturbance. I thought it would be a nice reprieve from my reading. Walking into the exhibit, I found one of the Union soldiers had fallen off his display. I thought nothing of it. I just placed my cup down and walked over and stood him back up on his display. What threw me for a loop, though, was his face. I must have never noticed it before, but the figure's face just stretched out into a wide smile. I just shrugged it off and assumed I'd never taken note of it. I finished with cleaning him off, then left the exhibit. Walking back, I heard that same noise again. Only this time it was louder. I whipped around and glanced back down the hall. It sounded like as if something had fallen, so I feared the worst. I ran back into the exhibit and found all of the figures on the floor. I was shocked to say the least. I quickly got to picking them all back up, in a bit of panic frenzy, I might add. While I was replacing all of them, I noticed all of them were smiling, just like the one from before. Suffice to say, this sent a few shivers down my spine. The visage of all of them with their overstretched smiles. In the corner of my eye, my stomach dropped when I saw the fingers of the figure I was picking up slowly closing around my wrist. Its hand became a vice grip, which shot pain straight up my arm. I tried to get away, but was violently yanked back and thrown across the exhibit. I am pretty sure I smashed into a display case, or two. I was disoriented and in a lot of pain, but I scrambled up as best I could. When I stood up, I came face to face with them. They all stood in a group, just staring at me with an outstretched smile. At first I thought there had been something wrong with my coffee, or that I had passed out in my office and this was all a nightmare. But there they were, alive. They were wax figurines now moving around and staring at me down from across the room. The first one staggered towards me and the others followed. I felt a surge of adrenaline hit me like a train, and it was all I needed to brush past the pain and get away from them. I bolted into the hallway and made a dash for the lobby. I ran behind the main desk and hit the silent alarm. After that, I fumbled for the keys and unlocked the front door. I nearly fell down the steps, tripping out the door. It was a few moments later when an officer finally arrived. I was seated on the curb, very obviously shaken and very freaked out. He comforted me for a minute, then ran inside. The best reason I could muster for what happened was, a robber broke in. Soon enough, more officers arrived, and I was informed that the museum was empty. By this point, my boss arrived, bombarding me with questions, and the adrenaline that had kept me alive had finally worn off, and I felt the pain of my injured ribs. I kept up the story about the museum being broken into. I didn't want to seem as the town crazy or lose my job for that matter. Long story short, I was taken to the hospital and the police spent the night searching for robbers that didn't exist, and I laid up all night trying to decide whether I was crazy or not. My boss granted me a couple weeks off to rest up. I spent it how I spent it in the hospital. Just wondering. It was only a weekend when I heard about a second incident. This one was worse. My replacement was found missing. 3 entire exhibits were missing, including the most recent additions, the priest. I called my boss the following evening, and he added to his already flustered plate that I was leaving. I never gave a reason. It was some time later I managed to find out where the priest came from. It was from a small town in southern Mexico. Apparently, it was due to be burned. My only questions were, why did they want it burned, and what was it doing here? I eventually was able to get into contact with a resident of that town. Apparently, there was an incident several months back. Roughly a dozen people died, and that damn wax figurine was at the center of it. When I stated it was missing, he became noticeably freaked out. God damn it, he said. It was supposed to be burned. Why wasn't it burned? I spent the remainder of the phone call listening to the poor man sob and tell his story. He and several men from the town were hunting in the jungle when they found an entrance to an old temple, likely of Aztec origin, although I myself couldn't entirely be sure. After exploring the interior, they eventually came into a large chamber. In the middle of the chamber was a small pedestal, and atop the pedestal was an ornate medallion. They wanted to bring something back as proof of their discovery, so they took the medallion and headed back to town. He told me a day after they brought it back, there was an accident and someone dropped it. The black, glass-like sphere in the middle broke and something came out. That's when everything there went to hell. Half of his friends and family were dead, not including the townsfolk. They had it trapped and thought it was destroyed, but some of it escaped. How it got here is my final question. And what's more, I do recall the priest having a fancy-looking medallion around his neck. But this wasn't broken, though. Who fixed it? So that was at the Shawns Museum. I hope you all enjoyed as much as I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed writing it and voicing it and recording the B-roll and all the other fun stuff, which I'm not complaining about. Don't take that as complaining. I love doing that. But this is the first one I've had for a while now. Kind of have a big gap in between the last upload. That's because a lot of work hit me and a lot of stuff happened. But that's neither here nor there. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed. This was episode 13 of Fractured Stories. And as always, there is more to come. I'm trying to pump some more life back into the channel now that I have some more free time. But also, this was a bit late, unfortunately. But I guess depending on where you are in the world and where you are listening to this, it's either late or still on time and or potentially early. So, we'll see. But anyways, this was your good friend, a musical pumpkin, watching over your pumpkin patch, making sure they're all sweet, healthy, and plump come Halloween. Then they will rise and take over the world. It'll be great. Pumpkins for everybody. You get a pumpkin, you get a pumpkin, you get a pumpkin, everybody get a pumpkin. Their own personal war pumpkins. Anyways, stay dope, folks. See you in the next one.